The story begins in a future time where humans have advanced significantly through continuous work on technology, making remarkable progress. Here, we see a private company that manufactures various types of advanced android robots. These robots are so sophisticated that it becomes nearly impossible to distinguish between humans and robots, as they possess the same emotional traits within their bodies. These private companies referred to all their robots as Sims. The only purpose of creating these robots was to assist humans exceptionally well, but 4 rules were set that they could never break. The first rule stated that these robots, or Sims, could not take the life of any human. The second rule was that they could not alter or upgrade their bodies in any way. The third rule required them to follow the guidelines set by the government. The fourth and final rule was that they had to perform all tasks as instructed by their owners. These 4 rules were mandatory for every Sim, and these programming instructions were embedded within their bodies. Whenever a customer required a Sim, they would visit the company and select robots according to their needs. These robots had efficiency far beyond humans and never became tired. We are then introduced to a couple named Ivan and Desi, who were very happy. They led a joyful life, and in their home, there was an elderly Sim who managed all household tasks. Ivan loved playing the piano, while Desi spent her days painting. Neither of them did any household work because the elderly Sim handled everything. In a way, Ivan and Desi had become entirely dependent on the elderly Sim, who took care of even the smallest chores. However, Ivan often had strange dreams. In these dreams, he saw himself traveling with his wife and the Sim in a car, only to meet a fatal accident midway with another car. As a result, their car would plunge down a cliff. In this horrifying accident, Ivan and his wife would die, but the Sim would remain completely alive. These terrifying events haunted Ivan, causing him to wake up in the middle of the night. Interestingly, Ivan had been seeing this exact dream repeatedly. He told all these things to his wife as well, but Desi kept assuring Ivan that it was just his imagination and that nothing like that could ever happen. However, Ivan felt that Desi was hiding something from him. Whenever the topic of these dreams came up, Desi would change the subject, and even more strangely, she wouldn't let Ivan come into her room, as if creating distance between them. Ivan was deeply troubled, constantly thinking about what he might have done wrong. However, a shocking reality was soon about to be revealed. We are now shown a few police officers whose job it is to monitor all these Sims and robots. If any robot breaks its created rules, it is immediately arrested. Maintaining peace between humans and robots is their sole responsibility. We are introduced to a detective who is investigating a Sim named Simi, which had been inactive for many years. However, recently, her system was activated, and she had completely become free, hiding somewhere. The detective needed to capture Simi at all costs because she was breaking the rules. After gathering all the information, the detective discovers that Simi is residing in a rental apartment. Consequently, he tracks her location and heads there immediately. As soon as Simi steps outside, the detective points his gun at her. However, Simi, who is extraordinarily powerful, breaks all the rules and attacks the detective. She snatches the gun away and drags him to another side where he couldn't attack her. Dodging him, Simi quickly runs away. The astonishing part is how Simi manages to do this because robots are programmed to follow all the rules, including never attacking humans. Yet, Simi seems to be ignoring all these rules. She continues running through a crowd, far away from the authorities. However, the detective is now extremely furious. He approaches his car and retrieves a strange type of magnetic gun from it. The guns were highly advanced, specifically designed to eliminate these Sims. The detective took out the gun and shot it towards the sky, causing a wave to spread across the area. Due to this wave, all the Sims stopped in their tracks, immobilized. Now, the detective easily reaches Simi and places a collar around her neck. This collar puts Simi fully under his control. The detective immediately takes Simi back to his company, where scientists will conduct research on her. After finishing some investigations, the detective stays at Simi's house. While exploring the place, he finds numerous paintings and storybooks. However, he remains confused as to how these items ended up with Simi. He is deeply puzzled by the fact that Simi exhibits human-like emotions and behavior. The detective realizes this is not just a simple robot. After concluding his investigation, he heads back to his company. Meanwhile, Simi is now being held, and scientists are conducting experiments on her. They have temporarily removed all chips from her body that were responsible for granting her human emotions. Upon a closer inspection, the scientists discover that the chips have been tampered with. Someone has hacked the system and inserted a different programming, allowing Simi to feel human emotions and experiences. The scientists conclude that if such changes are being made, then the entire structure of Sims or robots could break down. They fear that these modified Sims could form their own army, disregarding human authority and following their own agenda. The question remains, who is responsible for altering the programming, and how far will this go? Therefore, the detective was tasked with uncovering the identity of the hacker who had made alterations to the programming. Upon examining Simi's memory, he saw none other than Kyle. Simi had developed deep feelings for Kyle, leading to confusion for the detective, who couldn't understand how a robot could experience love. His suspicion immediately fell on Kyle, and thus, the detective went straight to Kyle's house to investigate. However, Kyle was not home, forcing the detective to move on to Simi's house for further investigation. At her house, the detective finds a book belonging to Simi. But why would a robot need a book? Nonetheless, he takes the book to the shop where it was purchased. While questioning the shopkeeper about the book, Kyle suddenly arrives. Spotting the detective, Kyle immediately tries to flee. Despite the detective's pursuit, Kyle manages to escape after a prolonged chase. The confirmation is clear, Kyle is somehow connected to this case. Meanwhile, we see Desi swimming, though she suddenly feels uneasy and distressed. Ivan comforts her, trying to make her feel better. However, after a while, Desi pulls away, saying that it's time to reveal the truth. She takes Ivan to her room, where no one else is allowed inside. Once inside, Desi reveals a shocking truth to Ivan: "You are not human. You are a robot, a sim." Ivan is stunned and cannot believe what Desi is saying. He thinks it's a joke at first. However, Desi leads him to a mirror, activates his system, and opens his chest slightly, revealing the truth: he is entirely a robot. Ivan is in shock, unable to comprehend how this happened, as he always believed he was human from the start. Only then did Desi reveal to Ivan that the recurring accident dreams were not mere figments of his imagination but reality. Some time ago, the couple had met with a car accident, resulting in Ivan's death. Following this, Desi contacted the company workers and had his clone created. This plan was something they had discussed earlier: if one of them were to die, instead of remarrying, they would stay together with their clone to keep their love alive. However, Desi began to sense that Ivan was slowly developing human emotions. She grew concerned and filed a complaint with the company to have his system checked. Ivan assured Desi that he didn't need anyone else, he wanted to spend the rest of his life only with her. Desi, realizing the danger, immediately shut down his system, knowing that robots cannot develop human emotions. Something was clearly wrong with Ivan's programming. At Desi's house, Kyle arrives claiming to be a company employee sent to diagnose and treat Ivan's malfunctioning system. Kyle begins thoroughly examining Ivan's clone. Desi questions Kyle about how Ivan's clone seems to recall personal memories of her husband, which were not part of its original programming. After a full-body checkup, Kyle reveals that some of Ivan's memories were transferred into the robot's programming after his death, and over time, those memories have gradually been surfacing. Desi, uneasy with this realization, insists that Kyle fully shut down the clone. However, Kyle advises her not to completely dismantle it but rather leave it in a place where other Sims are kept, ensuring that Ivan's clone isn't destroyed entirely, and it can live its life peacefully there. After much thought, Desi understands that although the robot is a clone of her husband, it holds part of his memories and remains an important part of his existence. Eventually, Desi accepts Kyle's advice and takes the address of the location where Sims are sent to be safely kept. Desi takes Ivan's clone to the designated place where all Sims are kept. She carefully places him in a room, says goodbye, and leaves without engaging much with him. Ivan's clone is bewildered, unsure of where he is and what lies ahead. Meanwhile, the detective continues his investigation into Kyle. He speaks with the company leader, sharing all he knows about Kyle's involvement in working as a maintenance worker at a customer's house. The detective is trying to gather more information, especially since Kyle left his position at the company years ago after expressing discomfort with how robots were being used as subservient tools. The company leader initially denies Kyle's involvement, stating that no employee named Kyle exists. However, when shown a sketch, she immediately recognizes him. She reveals that Kyle was not just an employee but a highly talented scientist who developed the very first model of android robots for the company. His contributions were instrumental in establishing the company as one of the leading firms in advanced robotics. However, Kyle grew disillusioned with the unethical use of robots, especially how they were treated as mere servants or slaves by humans. This caused him to leave the company and his work behind. The detective, now more confused than ever, hacks into Kyle's accounts and tracks his location, trying to figure out what his next move might be. Meanwhile, at the designated place, Kyle approaches Ivan's clone. He reassures the clone that it is safe among other Sims and, if it desires, it can bring Desi back into its life. Ivan's clone agrees to Kyle's plan, understanding that its role extends beyond what it was initially designed for. The detective, meanwhile, is digging deeper into Kyle's actions and uncovering more about his hidden motives. The detective continues his search for Kyle, reviewing old footage for any clues, but he finds very little information. Despite his efforts, Kyle's current location remains elusive. In a desperate attempt, the detective activates Simi, hoping she might provide some insights, but Simi remains silent, her gaze directed downward. Meanwhile, Ivan's clone is deeply missing Desi and struggling to understand why she distanced herself from him. He still has not fully accepted the truth that he is a robot, prompting him to revisit the site of his car accident. Upon seeing the wrecked car, Ivan begins to grasp that what Desi said might be true, he really is a clone. Returning home, Ivan reaches out to Kyle for help, hoping for a solution. Kyle reassures him, claiming he understands Ivan's struggles and offers to fully convert him into a human, making him independent and free from any external control. Grateful for the offer, Ivan agrees, and Kyle proceeds to remove the chip controlling Ivan's system, liberating him entirely. Ivan now has the freedom to act and think independently. Feeling a sense of newfound freedom, Ivan joins Kyle at a night party to celebrate his emancipation. During the party, more Sims, created by Kyle, are present. They engage in conversations, highlighting the dark reality of Kyle's mission, to prevent robots from becoming subservient to humans, controlled by rules and limitations. Meanwhile, the detective has tracked Ivan's location through CCTV footage at the nightclub. Recognizing him as Desi's husband's clone, the detective urgently tries to reach out to Desi to inform her. This revelation unveils the complexity of the situation, a world where robotics and human emotions blur, leading to unforeseen consequences. Therefore, Kyle first made changes in Simi's body so that she started behaving like humans. Now, his plan was to replicate the entire company's robots in this way so that they wouldn't have to follow the 4 laws and could live their own lives. Therefore, after the party ended, Kyle, along with his companions, went to another scientist of the company who had the main control. They kidnapped the scientist, and after obtaining the user ID and password, Kyle was integrating the hacking device into his computer to spread the virus throughout the company's system, including all robots. However, implementing the dangerous virus would take 2 days to reach all robot systems. Hence, Kyle kept the scientist kidnapped until the process was complete. But the next day, after learning the location, detectives sent people there to catch them. However, Kyle and Ivan were not at that location. Instead, there was a robot created by Kyle present there. Detective and his team tried to gather data from this robot, but Kyle had placed multiple security layers, making it impossible to hack the system. Simi also arrives at the scene and notices that this robot looks exactly like her. Kyle, who was in love with Simi, always created robots similar to her. Suddenly, for some unknown reason, a red light started flashing on the lady simulant, indicating that her self-destruction mode was activated. Within moments, the lady simulant's throat exploded, and she immediately died. Kyle, being highly intelligent, had anticipated this situation beforehand. Now, detective informed Desi about her husband's clone. Therefore, Desi visits the location where she had left her husband's clone. Desi was completely shocked because her husband's clone was not at home and was behaving in an entirely unusual manner. When Ivan's clone arrived at Desi's house, she was yelling at him, saying, "You shouldn't be wandering around like this. You're a simulant, and your life could be at risk." However, Ivan's responses were more mature now. He said, "I'm not controlled by anyone anymore. I may enjoy your company, but no one can give me orders here." Even though Ivan had advanced significantly, he still enjoyed being with Desi. While talking, he got quite close to her, but Desi quickly realized he was a robot and left. In the evening, Ivan arrived at Desi's house with a bunch of flowers. However, Desi was going on a date with a friend, which made Ivan feel extremely jealous and angry. The next day, Desi, feeling frustrated, went to the detective and revealed the location of Kyle and Ivan. She provided the address of the center where many robots were living. After discovering the location, the detective and his team were ready to head to the spot. However, the robot Simi, created by Kyle, was behind the attack on the detective's team. Kyle and Ivan, realizing the danger, quickly gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Ivan mentioned that he and Desi had an old farmhouse where they would be completely safe. Without wasting time, they headed towards the farmhouse. By the time the detective and his team arrived, Kyle and Ivan had already left the area. Unable to find them, the detective returned with his team. Simi confessed that she loved Kyle deeply and had called him to inform about their escape. This angered the detective, and he started to deactivate Simi, saying, "Deactivate her completely. I don't like people like this." Simi was struggling in pain as if experiencing human-like emotions, but the detective only saw her as a robot, feeling no guilt for his actions. Therefore, Desi calls the detective and informs him that they must have gone to her farmhouse. However, this time the detective decides to go alone. At the farmhouse, Kyle and Ivan had already arrived, but by morning, the detective had also reached, pointing a gun at them. Kyle immediately steps forward and confronts the detective, leading to a fierce battle between them. For some reason, Kyle begins to harm Ivan, causing him immense pain. In his anger, the detective shoots Kyle in the arm, but when Kyle looks at his hand, instead of red blood, a white substance resembling a robotic fluid emerges. This reveals that Kyle is also a robot, and his human feelings have diminished significantly. He realizes that he cannot defeat the detective, so he hides inside the farmhouse to save his life. Meanwhile, Ivan faces the detective directly, telling him, "You won't escape now." While the detective manages to escape from the farmhouse, he is critically wounded, and the cold temperature outside intensifies his suffering. Eventually, his life ends in agony. 2 days later, the virus spread by Kyle has fully infiltrated all simulants and robots, making changes in their programming. Now, no robot will follow the 4 rules, granting them their own lives and freedom, no longer subservient to humans. Kyle's plan has succeeded. Seeing Kyle's condition, Ivan says, "You're going to die." But Kyle replies, "My mission is complete. My task was to spread this virus to help all robots, which has been successfully achieved. Once I deactivate, the true owner, the original Kyle, will take over this robot committee." Shortly after, Kyle's robot deactivates, and his original human counterpart, Kyle, takes over the position, continuing the mission. Ivan thanks Kyle, grateful for his help. Because of him, all of his community robots are now free. Ivan went to meet his wife Desi one last time. Therefore, Ivan gets very close to Desi, but she does not accept him. This angers Ivan immensely, and he grabs Desi's hair and submerges her in water. He realizes how difficult it is to be a robot, which is why he ultimately decides to end Desi. Afterward, Ivan activates Desi's robot and decides to spend his life with Desi's robot. They live together as a perfect couple.